Okay, so let's go into this again and look at some of these other organs that, secondary organs, as they call them, that are really key to our immune system. Um, so we've kind of, just stepped beyond lymphatic just a little bit. Um, so this is a kind of fuzzy area between lymphatic and immune because they're just, so tied in together. But we see that a lot. So anyway, other lymph organs. So there was a time actually in my own career where certain or of these organs were considered non-essential. I mean, really seriously, as early as the 1960s, they didn't quite, Western medicine, I should say, didn't quite get it. So they're just like, you'll survive without them. We'll just take them out. Anyway, so that's kind of interesting. So these organs in the body are specialized to support the immune processes of the body. So let's just talk about the spleen first. So the spleen is located just really, tucked in next to the stomach. So in anatomy, we call anything below the diaphragm and lungs and above the lower pelvis, we call this the upper left quadrant. Remember, anytime we see a picture, it's like we're looking at somebody else, not ourselves in the mirror. So this is this person's upper left quadrant. Yeah, so it's tucked under that left rib cage. Now the spleen. You may have heard stories about how the spleen has been removed, especially after an accident. As it turns out, this organ has so little connective tissue. It's almost like lace. They can't even surgically operate on it per se. It's so delicate and so vascular, so many vessels. It'd be like, if you've ever sewn anything, it'd be like sewing lace. There's really nothing to, hold it. So if you've been in a car accident and you've had physical damage to your spleen, um, typically they're going to surgically remove it because they can't repair it. Um, it's just too delicate, and that's that is a life-saving, perfect indication for surgery. By the way, so it's a really fascinating organ because it's kind of like the lymph nodes, and it really helps filter um, the lymphatic fluid and remove things that don't belong in the system. The function or physiology of the spleen include they certain platelets or blood-rich, you know, particles can be stored there. It could be a reservoir. It's been kind of used. The analogy used is like it's a recycling center. Um, so it definitely supports the immune system as well as the circulatory system. The thymus is actually a endocrine or hormonal gland. The thymus is located near the sternum, behind the sternum, posterior, and this is where T cells derive their name from. Because when young blood cells, it's kind of like the thymus gland sort of trains or helps educate certain white blood cells, which become lymphocells. Same thing, pretty much. Lymphocyte means cells, um, but it turns them into T cells. That's where T cells get their name because they've been sort of trained at the thymus gland. It's kind of like the university of, well, it's kind of like warfare, because the T cells are really they're kind of the SWAT team, of the body, if you're going to use military terms. But yeah, they just like, when all other systems of the immune system, don't quite cut it, the T cells go in and, they're called sometimes the killer cells. They're just like, okay, we're going to poison this situation and, take it out. So they're really the SWAT team. Tonsils, they're located back in the throat, deep throat, and it doesn't talk about this, but also you have adenoids deep behind your nose. So these are above the throat, actually, deep in the mouth, and then also the nose, as far as the adenoids go. So the mouth and the nose are like huge openings for pathogens, bacteria, fungus, viruses, everything to enter. So in my day, if your tonsils got swollen a few times, sore throat, which of course is what they're supposed to do because they're collecting, pathogens, they would just surgically, yeah, they would just surgically remove it, tonsillectomy. Tonsillitis simply means tonsils that are itis, inflamed. So I don't have tonsils anymore. I don't think they took out my adenoids, though. But they stopped doing that routinely, which is kind of good. So Peyer's patches, things used to be named after the scientist or doctor who discovered them. So you still see some, structures named with a capital letter. It's named after the person who sort of figured it out. And so anyway, there's special lymphatic tissues throughout the intestines, or the opu, or the yeah. So we haven't gotten in this class. We haven't gotten into digestive system yet, but there's about 30 feet of small intestines, and then it transitions into large intestines or colon. And at that transitional point, there's a one-way valve and a special little organ called the appendix. Now, the appendix is in, contrary to the spleen, upper left quadrant, it's in the lower right quadrant. And it is a little sac of special tissue full of white blood cells, or actually lymphocytes, lymph cells, that are designed to fight invading bacteria. So it's kind of like the army at the gate between the small and the large intestines. There's a lot of tissues that have, little lymphoid, meaning, it's kind of like a little fortress of different kinds of cells, lymphocytes. So lymphocytes is kind of the word for a lot of what used to be the white blood cells. But if they're stationed or they don't move, like in the case of nodes in certain lymphoid tissues, they never make it to the blood. So, but they're pretty much, they're kind of like soldiers. They get stationed somewhere, and they don't get to go anywhere ever. But they're very similar as far as what they do. So that brings us down to sort of there's two categories of how the body immunity works. One's called the innate, and the other one is adaptive. So innate includes things just like inflammation in general. If you cut your finger, you clean it. Otherwise, it gets infected. If it gets infected, you get a lot of pus, which are lymphocytes and other things coming to deal with all the germs. And so inflammation itself is kind of like an automatic, common way the body deals with things. It could also be fever. It's just like the first line. It just your body is always protecting you, and it jumps in to help you. Adaptive becomes a little bit more specific. So, this happens, they call it non-specific because it happens just automatically. It's just like an automatic response. The body's always doing this actually every day to different degrees. Specific is more where it's like a deeper level where there's a specific response for a specific problem, so to speak. And this is where specific lymphocytes or immune cells come into play. Some of which inhabit certain tissue. I mean, those are the guys that don't get to go anywhere.